I decided to share this story after a lot of debate with friends and family, as it is more of an impact to my psyche and on the people around me. This story, and this story alone, brought me to therapy. A little context for this story. I was going on a camping trip with my family members when I was younger. They are all rather used to nature as they live out in the sticks in Canada, and all went camping regularly. Now we didn't go to any set campgrounds, but instead we decided to head out to the middle of the forest where my cousins had done days of laboring work ahead of time, cutting down trees so we can fit an RV on our own private campground. In total, we were 6 people. The first night was rather normal, except for one point in the middle of the night. The sky was clear with a nice view of the stars overhead. We were sitting around a campfire, watching the flames burn and listening to the crickets and other forest noises. Then, at one point, we were in the middle of a conversation when I saw one of my cousins turning and twisting in his chair as he tried to get a good view of the tree line. We stopped our conversation immediately, and our heads snapped to look at him. He turns to us and says, "You guys hear that?" We looked at each other as we focused in on the sounds around us. I only heard the fire crackling, and that was the issue. The sounds of the forest completely stopped. Out of fear of a big animal approaching, my cousin rushed into the RV to get a gun while the rest of us followed. We waited for an hour or two in the RV, waiting for the sound of footsteps, but none came. The forest returned to its natural state, and it was lively again. After that first night, we didn't get as much sleep as we were scared a bear or maybe a pack of wolves were going to come around. That would be the least of our issues, it seemed. But nevertheless, we continued to camp like nothing happened. That next day, we were out on the lake fishing when we saw a few people dotting a small little island in the middle of it. It wasn't necessarily unnatural to see people out here, but what we were doing was technically illegal, so we didn't want a lot of people seeing what we were doing. But we continued to fish calmly as to not draw attention to ourselves. After 15 minutes or so of fishing, we saw a boat depart from that island and head directly toward us. We considered booking it, but we realized that it would make our presence seem more suspicious, so we waited. They eventually got to us, and there were 2 men in the boat. One of them was skinny and had a white tank top, jean shorts, and a blue cap. The other one was more plump and wore a camo vest with a white t-shirt underneath, matching jean shorts and the same blue cap. "Hey, what are you guys doing out here?" said the skinny man, already sounding somewhat accusatory. We told him that we just drove out here today just for a day of fishing. Despite our somewhat normal story, they seemed to see through our charade, when the plump man interrupted my cousin and said, "You guys don't happen to know about that fire on the other side of this lake, do ya?" My cousin tried to lie and said he had no clue, and tried to confirm that we only got there that morning just to fish. After a few more lines of dialogue, they seemed to believe us and told us not to stay until nightfall as the animals are bad in the area. They turned their boat around and headed back to the island. Me and my cousin looked at each other thinking we dodged a bullet, but that bullet would still head directly towards us. That night, it happened. 4 of my cousins decided to hunt through the night as they had made a custom hunting blind earlier that day. They took the weapons and headed out as me and my other cousin headed to sleep for the night. I was listening yet again to the sounds of the forest, and I was also listening when they started to fade away again. As they faded away, new sounds emerged in the night. Footsteps. Initially, I thought it was my cousins coming back from the hunt after getting something, but to my dismay, it wasn't. I heard someone say, "Hey, you kids here." Even at such a young age, I could tell there was malicious intent behind these words. I slowly got out of the bunk bed and swiftly moved toward the closest window to ensure my dread was warranted. As I peeked out of it, I saw the same 2 guys from the boat and 3 people I've never seen before. Despite the change in apparel, I can tell it was them. As they walked into our campsite, they went to the 2 tents in front of the RV, where we kept some extra supplies. They barely looked inside before all of them turned to the RV and slowly stepped over to it. I tried to silently bolt over to my cousin to try and get his help and wake him up. But when I started shaking him awake, he said loudly, "Leave me alone. It's the middle of the night." That triggered a chain of events I only thought would be possible in my nightmares. Immediately after saying that, these guys started banging on the RV, telling us to open up and unlock the door. The second they started doing this, my cousin woke up fast and ran to the kitchen and opened a drawer to find some kitchen knife. We got far away from the door and waited for the banging to stop. When it did, the door flew outward, and we saw 3 of the guys stomp into the RV. They slowly looked around the cramped RV and stopped when they finally caught our gaze. Our fear was obvious. There was no mistaking it for any other emotion. We had no power here. The skinny man from earlier walked over to us, and my cousin swung his knife at him. It cut his hand a little bit, but he got adrenaline from it and ripped the knife from his hand, and it clambered onto the ground. We were defenseless, so when they grabbed me and put me on my feet and forced me out of the RV, all I could do was scream and struggle. They gripped me by the collar of my shirt as they led us deeper into the forest in the middle of the night. I tried to scream, but they'd put their hand over my mouth. I looked over to my cousin, who had the same thing happen to him. We couldn't do anything. The guys were laughing and joking around like this was any normal situation for them. As we walked deeper into the forest, the less we tried to struggle. We nearly gave up when finally my cousin bit the hand of one of the men and was able to let out one more shriek. After a grunt of pain, the guy immediately punched my cousin in the face to keep him quiet and put his hand back over his mouth. We were getting close to the lake when finally we heard a loud crack. One of the guys blurted out, "Gunshot!" They were clearly confused when we heard 2 more gunshots ring out. The guys let go of us, and we heard my cousins yelling at them. It was almost incoherent to me, purely from the suddenness of it. Our captors ran off into the forest, leaving us standing there in shock. Our cousins came over and assisted us back to the van. I was shaking and shivering despite being a warm night. They tried to talk, but I could only shake my head and nod. We left that night. I wasn't able to sleep well for weeks, thinking what would have happened if my cousin wasn't able to scream one more time. We told the local officers, risking the fine for technically camping illegally. In the end, they never found the guys, and we haven't heard from the police since. So guys, be careful out there. Make sure you know your area and what is around you. Always stay cautious. I, an 18-year-old female, have been working for a large department store in the UK for just over a year now. This story happened when I was 16. It was late evening, around 9 p.m. or so, as we stay open late for the Christmas rush. I was walking across the shop floor when a man brushed very close to me. I'm often in my own world at work, and this made me jump a little. He must have noticed this because he said, "Hello." I responded, and he asked me how I said, "Good. And you?" He nodded and walked towards the doors out into the car park. I didn't think much of this at all, but it did catch me off guard. I decided to walk across to the other side of the shop. Bear in mind the floor plan is massive, and continue tidying rails there. I hear a man shout from a few meters away, and I look up to see the same guy again. It's only now that I really took notice of his appearance. He had a large tattoo of a dagger on his right cheekbone and was wearing a black jumper with the hood pulled up. He was about a foot taller than me and clearly much older. I asked him if he needed any help, and he gestured for me to come closer to him. I tend to freeze and follow instructions in this situation, which is not exactly the best survival instinct. I naively thought that he just wanted to know which exit he needed. He asked me what my name was, and I told him. "You've got really pretty eyes," he said, and at this point I was getting a bit freaked out. I thanked him hesitantly and turned to leave, but he put his hand on my forearm. Again, I kind of just froze. "Have you got a boyfriend? Have you got Snapchat? Can I get your number?" He became more and more persistent, and I just wanted him to leave. I told him that number 1, I was working, and number 2, I'm underage. He then asked me how old I was, and I told him I was 16. Again, I don't know why I answered him, but my brain just shuts down, to which he responded, it could work. At this point, I was really shaken up and didn't know what to do. Thankfully, one of my male colleagues walked up to me to ask a question, making him leave, winking at me as he did so. Noticing my distress, he asked me what had happened, and I explained the situation. He urged me to report it, but I was hesitant as I didn't want to inconvenience anyone or get them into trouble. However, there are a lot of teenage girls that work in the shop, and I wouldn't want them to be targeted, so I told one of the managers. They notified the store security and sent me off the shop floor to get some coffee and calm down. I came back, finished my shift, and went to leave. The security guy stopped me on my way out and told me that he didn't mean to alarm me, but they had managed to track the man's car and he was parked inside it. They said there was a high probability he was waiting for me, and I shouldn't go out there by myself, just as a precaution. He escorted me to my mom's car and we drove home. I'm so thankful that nothing ended up happening to me that night. I often think about what would have happened if my friend didn't persuade me to report it, and I went out alone. This happened around 10 years ago, give or take. My friend, let's call him Craig, and I made plans to go hang out with our friend Jeremy and his new girlfriend. Neither of us had to work the next day, so we grabbed some beers and made our way to Jeremy's mom's apartment complex, where Jeremy was temporarily staying. When we got there, we went out into the woods behind the apartment complex to drink. This wasn't just a little patch of trees, but a good-sized patch of forest. For context, this was in New York State. It was a nice fall day, late afternoon, and the sun was still out. We finished the beers and decided to go get more. So we go to the store and get some more beer, head back to the apartments and enter the woods. This was autumn, and the light outside was right at that stage where it starts to very quickly fade. We underestimated how dark it would be once we were in the woods, and how fast the light was fading away. We planned on making a fire, but didn't really count on it being so dark when we got back. So we're walking into this sort of clearing area, from where we can choose to head off in a few different directions. We're having a good time, laughing, talking, but something not too far in the distance catches my eye. It's too dark to tell, but I swear I can see a very large figure. No, that's too big. It's probably a tree or just your eyes fucking with you. So, as Jeremy is gabbing in the background, I ask Craig as an aside if he can see something standing up ahead, and he's like, "Nah, where? Oh wait, there. Oh shit." We were still walking, and it was becoming clear I wasn't seeing things. There was a very large person standing in the forest up ahead, apparently facing us. So I try to get Jeremy's attention without cluing the big guy in that we've noticed him, just in case something sketchy is going on, which I get the serious feeling there is. We tell Jeremy there's a person up ahead, but Jeremy is in a jovial, no-chill state, and he exclaims, "Holy shit, is that Bigfoot?" We humor him and laugh, but it's clear to Craig and I that this is actually creepy and probably not a safe situation, and it's clear that Jeremy is not understanding that. It's hard to communicate the pacing of our approach onto the guy, but essentially, we had gotten too close not to acknowledge him, partially because it took us a moment to get Jeremy's attention, and partially because we weren't trying to just turn around and run like we were scared. There were 4 of us and 1 of him, after all. But this was a big guy. Not supernaturally big or anything, and not like he was jacked or anything like that. Just a naturally gigantic dude, very tall and heavy without being particularly fat. And he was just standing there, in the middle of the forest, in the dark, alone. So as we approach this guy and just sort of say, "Hello, Jeremy," the absolute fool that he was, gets way too close into this guy's personal space as he enthusiastically tells him about how scary he looks, standing in the woods alone. "We thought you were an alien or something, bro. I thought you were gonna jump up and boom." Jeremy mimes an extra set of teeth coming out of his mouth like a xenomorph from the Alien vs. Predator movies, all up in this guy's face. To be clear, Jeremy is not trying to be intimidating or a jerk in any way. He is trying to be friendly and joking around with this guy, but he is literally leaning into this dude and practically sticking his hands in his face with his impression of an alien. Jeremy was kind of a moron, and his poor girlfriend, who was a few years younger than us and very shy, was clearly terrified, to which Jeremy was also oblivious. So Craig and I are both standing here kind of trying to brainstorm a way out of this situation. Jeremy is clearly too dense to get it if we say that we have to go. He'd be like, "What? We just got here. Aren't we having a fire?" And we were trying to seem confident and in control of the situation. Big guy says, "Oh, you guys are drinking. I got some drinks too." And he walks over to the tree line where he has a bag laying beside a tree. He reaches in the bag, and while he grabs a beer with one hand, he sort of sneakily pulls something else out with his other hand and places it into his hoodie pocket. I'm convinced it was a knife or a gun, probably a knife in all honesty. He then reapproaches us and cracks open his beer. I glance around casually, and then I notice something else. Somebody else is out here. There's someone moving along the tree line to our left, a relatively good distance away, but somebody else is here, and they're circling around as if to come up behind us. Fuck. This. I need to leave now. So I go, "Well, I gotta work in the morning, and Craig's driving me home, so we gotta get out of here." Jeremy, in his infinite wisdom, responds, "What? You said you didn't have to work tomorrow." I facepalm so hard on the inside. "No, Jeremy, you must have misheard me. I said I do have to work tomorrow." And Jeremy, proving there is no end to his wisdom, says, "All right, guys, well, it was nice hanging with you. Get home safe." He wasn't leaving the woods with us. Craig and I started walking away, and I told him about the other person circling to get behind us and that we needed to move. We start trying to brainstorm a way to get Jeremy and his girlfriend out of there and decide to call him and tell him that his mom was out in the parking lot looking for him. Jeremy is terrified of his mom, Craig explains to me, and this should work. Because we clearly couldn't just call him and tell him the situation was not safe without him blurting out, "This guy isn't sketchy, I feel totally safe." Jeremy was very mad at us for lying about his mom. I think his girlfriend appreciated it, though. I'm not sure what was going on there that night. I've talked to several people about it over the years, and there are a few different ideas. Did they know we were coming back? Were they waiting for us? Or did we stumble into something we weren't meant to? Almost everyone I tell about this says, "You guys just accidentally interrupted a drug deal." But something about that just doesn't seem right. Who does a drug deal in the middle of the woods at night? I don't know. Very possibly just a homeless dude with no ill intention, and another homeless dude with no ill intention. But it was a very creepy and scary situation. As I was walking home from work last night, about halfway to my house, a disheveled man who looked to be either homeless or extremely down on his luck crossed paths with me from the other side of the sidewalk. He had initially been walking in the opposite direction, but as soon as he saw me, he immediately turned around and started following me. He began rambling incoherently and aggressively, and his words were so slurred that I hardly understood a thing he said. All I could make out was something about a care package and "look at you." It was obvious this man was under the influence of multiple substances. I quickened my pace and tried to avoid any eye contact with the man, and he was getting agitated that I wasn't paying attention to him. When my walking speed got too quick for his inebriated stumbling to keep up with, he stopped talking and instead began just trying to follow me. I kept looking over my shoulder at him, and every time I saw him, he would either stop or try to duck behind a bush. Finally, I started outright sprinting and looking for a spot that I could hide in myself. I came up to my local mosque and tried to sneak around the corner into the parking lot of it, where there was a tree that I hid behind. While hiding there, I frantically dialed 911. I told them that a strange man displaying unstable behavior was trying to follow me, and described my location, myself, and the man to them. The dispatcher assured me that officers were on their way to where I was, but while waiting for them, I saw a figure heading up the sidewalk in front of the parking lot I was hiding in. Panic immediately filled me, until the passerby was close enough to where I could see that it was not the same man who had just bothered me, and they turned out to be harmless. Mere moments after this, the cops arrived to where I was, pulled up next to the tree, and motioned for me to come out and talk to them. The officer driving the vehicle asked me the standard questions: a description of the incident, where I was when it happened, etc. While we were talking, he spotted a man in another parking lot down the street, not far from where I had first encountered the creep. He asked me if this was the man I had encountered, and it was hard to tell between the darkness and the distance, but I was pretty sure it was. Another police vehicle had pulled into that parking lot, and it appeared that an officer got out to talk to the man. The officer I had been talking to asked me how far I was from my house, and I told him that I was pretty close to my street at this point. He assured me that I should be safe to walk the rest of the way home, and that they had other cop cars patrolling the area. I thanked him and finished walking home, without further incident, thank God. Shortly after I got home, I saw that I had a text from my boyfriend that read, "Are you okay?" The text had been sent at around the time the incident was occurring, as if he could sense I was in a fearful situation. I replied back, telling him what had happened. He told me that he had gotten yelled at by a homeless man earlier too. I described the creep I encountered to him and asked him if he thought it was the same guy. He said he didn't think so. We also had a brief phone call to make sure each other was okay. I let him know that I was home safe, and he told me he was in a vehicle with a group, so he was safe too. I don't know what the cops ended up doing about the man, but I hope he stays as far away from me as possible. This happened a couple of years ago to me and two other friends. We were probably 17 at the time. It was summer and we had plans to go to our friend's house. There is this park that is halfway from mine and hers, so my friends and I decided it could be nice to sit in this hut in the park and have a smoke on the way to our friends. This was in the evening, so it was getting dark already, and time passed. It was dark enough for the streetlights to turn on. It's important for the story to explain a bit how the hut was situated in the park. The park was shaped like a big circle around a lake. So the hut we sat at had two entrances from the left and right side. These entrances then connected to the main park path. The hut is open and just has bench seats in a circle and a roof, but open air if that makes sense. Anyways, the street lights on the right side were not working, so it was extremely dark on that side. My friends and I are chatting away and people are walking past like normal, nothing strange. Then this man comes from the left and is walking really slowly now. Normally this wouldn't catch my attention, but it's the summer, remember, and he had on a long, thick trench coat with a top hat that had a feather and sunglasses. He walked super slowly into the dark and just stood there in the dark. I could make out his silhouette just standing there. At this point, all of my friends are quiet as well, and we are feeling uneasy as we are all girls. Then the man begins to walk back towards the streetlight that has light on the left side. He stands there for a couple seconds staring again. Then he proceeded to walk slowly down the path to the hut, still staring at us. We thought maybe he would just walk through and wanted to scare us, but no. He then sits down in front of us and begins to talk. For context, we live in Brussels, so he started speaking French and said, "What a lovely evening, ladies." We speak and understand French, but in that moment we knew it was smarter to pretend we don't, so we just say, "Sorry, English." You can see him get agitated and mad. He starts going on this whole rant about how we should speak the language of the country stupid English people think they are better than everyone else. As I said, he was quite mad while saying all this. I began saying to my friends we should probably leave now. Our friend is expecting us at her house soon. Since my other friends were so scared too the minute I said that, they said yes and started to walk the path to the main park path, but they left their bags and everything else they had with them. I had to call them back to get their stuff. They They came running back, but he kept staring at us while we were trying to quickly gather our things. We got our things and started walking, when suddenly we hear, "Hey, hey, come back here." We turn around to see him holding up the can of Coke my friend had left, and he said we should not litter and to come back and throw it away. We began to run at this moment and didn't look back. The whole way to my friend's house we were so creeped out and scared that we thought he would follow us or something, and any person who walked behind us we panicked. What scared us the most was he had his hands in his pocket the entire time, and then moment he held up the Coke can. There was something else in his hand that shined with the streetlight. None of us could make it out, but we assumed with the shape of the object, the way it shined from the light, his behavior and his hand in his pocket the whole time, as well as calling for us to come back, we think he had a knife. We have never seen that man since, and all of us refuse to go around that area at night now. Really scared us. I know this story might not be as creepy of an encounter as some of the other posts on here, but this has stuck with me and my friends for a while, that he has been named the Hat Man. We're not sure what that man would have done if we had stayed longer or had come back to throw the Coke can out, but I'm glad we didn't find out. Be safe out there. You never know people's intentions. This happened over 10 years ago, so excuse me if the details are a little fuzzy. When I was in high school, my friend Claire came to sleep over. We made some plans to sneak out and hang out with some guys, and then one of them would drive us home. We go out to our friend's apartment, have some fun, and around midnight we decide it's time for us to head back. But when we ask to be taken back, everyone says no, despite previously agreeing to bring us back. Everyone said they were too drunk or too high, so we eventually decide to just start walking back, and we would make some phone calls to see if anyone could pick us up and bring us the rest of the way back. My house was a good 20 minutes away by car on the highway, so there was no way we were walking all the way back. The apartment was towards the back of the complex, so we start making our way to the entrance. We don't even get halfway there before a car slowly starts rolling up behind us. I was 15 or 16 at the time, and very naive to the ways of the world, so I wasn't too concerned, but Claire was a little smarter than me on this night. She tells me to start walking faster, so we start walking faster. The car also picks up their pace behind us. Again, she tells me to walk faster, so we start moving as fast as we can, and that's when the car pulled slightly in front of us, and two of the passenger doors open and two men get out. Realizing there's no walking faster to get out of this situation, she instructs me to run now. So she takes off running and I follow her. She runs towards a group of parked cars and jumps behind a pickup truck, and for a minute we hope and pray that we weren't spotted. This is where details get a little fuzzy. One of them must have gotten back in the car at some point, as there's only one of them following us behind the truck. We hear a set of footsteps quickly approaching, and she quietly indicates that we're now going into stealth mode. This man is on the other side of the truck that we're hiding behind. He's circling the truck looking for us, and we're slowly and quietly circling it on the opposite side to avoid being spotted. It felt like a scene from a movie or video game. We somehow managed to do 2 or 3 circles around the vehicle without being detected, and by the grace of the gods, he gives up and decides to go back to the car with his friends. This is our one shot to get away. She tells me to run again, so we run for what felt like an eternity, but in reality was probably only 15 or 20 seconds. We find the pool house area and find a spot to hide. We were hidden behind some fences and bushes and were anxiously waiting to see if they discover us. Their car pulls around to the pool house and we're biting our nails, hoping they don't stop and get out. The car slowly drives away, and we realize we haven't been spotted. We were safe for now. But the car circled around the apartment complex for hours and hours and hours. They weren't giving up on looking for us. We were safe for the time being, but now we needed to find a way out of there. It was the middle of winter, and of course we were dressed to impress the guys we went to hang out with, so short shorts and revealing tops. We were freezing. We found a dirty, disgusting Captain America blanket that we huddled up under while making phone calls to find someone to pick us up. We tried contacting the guys at the apartment, but no one answered our calls. None of our friends answered our calls. We felt completely alone and hopeless. But around 5 a.m. someone finally answered and said they would pick us up. The best news I had ever heard in my life. Our friend gets to the apartment complex but can't find the pool house. The group of men is still constantly circling around, so there's no way we're coming out of hiding. We managed to figure out where our friend is at with a little detective work, figuring out what building they're facing, what's in front of them, are there dumpsters nearby, etc., etc. We figure out where they're at, so we make a run for it. We spot their car and hop in as fast as we can. Go, 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 we tell them, and our friend speeds off towards the entrance. We pass the group of men on the way out, and that was the last we saw of them. We made it back around 6 a.m., just in time to sneak back in without my parents ever knowing we even left. If Claire hadn't been with me that night, I definitely would have been abducted, raped, and possibly killed. So thankful for Claire and our friend that picked us up, but a big fuck you to the adult men we went to hang out with as teenagers, and especially fuck you to the guys that intended to harm us. On a happier note, I'm now very diligent and aware of my surroundings, and we washed the dirty Captain America blanket and shared custody of it for years after this encounter. This week has been hectic. My 3 kids have the flu. Oldest was first, then my younger 2 caught it. After a visit to the clinic, I was heading to the CVS down the street from our house for their prescriptions. I decided last minute to drop my kids off at home with their dad so they could rest and I could go inside the store to pick up some Pedialyte. I consider our neighborhood to be safe. I've taken walks after dark and never felt afraid. Most of our neighbors are older folks who have lived there over a decade. When I pulled up to the CVS, I parked on the side parallel to our street. It's darker on that side, but the entrance is right around the corner and well lit. There was a man standing outside. He walked in front of my car and I could hear him talking, but my music was kind of loud. I figured he was on his phone or something. No real red flags yet. My husband called me as the man walked back towards the corner adjacent to the entrance. I got out of my car, still on the phone, telling my husband, "Yeah, kiddos have the flu. I'm picking up medicine at the CVS, etc." In a very pleasant voice, the man says to me, "Hey, I got a question for you. You know where Main Street is?" I, assuming he is asking for directions or the location of something, tell him I do. I'm still holding my phone to my ear. It's in a bright pink case, so I'm sure he could see it. Now, this man is standing directly in front of me. There is a pillar and a trash can behind him. Around the corner is a propane cage and a red box against the store's wall. Getting past him would put me in arm's reach. Next, he asks for a ride there, to a homeless shelter. It's very cold outside and he doesn't want to freeze. I empathized with him but said I couldn't. I offered to buy him gloves and or a blanket and to ask if an employee in the store could assist in finding him a ride. Sweet baby Jesus, this guy's face instantly changed to pure rage, then right back to pleasant. "Well, you know what happens to homeless people stuck outside. You're going to help me. It's right. Down the street." I'm standing there unsure what to do. My husband is on the phone asking what's going on. I gently tell the man that I don't feel comfortable doing that and that I have the flu. I don't. And my husband is on the phone with me. "I don't care about the flu." Now he's getting more angry and not moving away from my route into the store. I didn't want to turn my back on him to go back to my car, which was several feet away in the dark. While this guy is glaring at me, I decide to quickly walk past him. I had my mask from the clinic in my jacket pocket, so I pulled that out and held it in front of me while I moved towards the trash can. He looked disgusted, but kept telling me I need to give him a ride. "It's right down the street," he insisted. But I know where that street is, and it's not as close as he says. He tried to guilt me, and his words felt threatening, but he didn't actually threaten me verbally. Once I was around the corner, I rushed into the store straight to the pharmacy. My husband said he's calling the police. He heard the way the man was talking to me and said to stay in the store. My knees were shaking. I'm not usually the type to be so afraid when confronted. When I got to the pharmacy, I interrupted the pharmacist and a customer, apologizing, then told them what happened. The pharmacist sent the store manager out, tall guy with a long beard, looked like he doesn't take crap from people. The police had already arrived. The man was told to leave, which he did momentarily. He came back inside the store yelling obscenities and something about me. Now the store manager has told him to GTFO. He's trespassing on the property. The cop came back to talk to me and told me she has arrested him many times. He's loud and likes to yell at people, but he isn't violent. The pharmacist had me hiding behind the screen where they give vaccines and left the half door to the pharmacy cracked open in case I needed to get out of there. The cop had also told me this guy's first and last name, as did the store manager. Is that normal? The prescriptions are finally filled, and I leave the store. The police parked next to my car to keep an eye on me. Oh, and the man refused a ride from the cop to the shelter. Later I looked him up. His name is unique, so he was easy to find online. Surprise, surprise, he has a very long record in 3 states and several counties. Tons of public intoxication charges, DWI, urinating in public, assault and battery, and indecent exposure. I also looked up the homeless shelter. I thought, there isn't one where he wanted me to take him, but that area is super sketchy. Earlier today, I went to the corner store across from the CVS and told my friend, the overnight shift employee, what happened. She kicks him out of the store and calls the police every time she sees him because he yells at and threatens customers. But he always takes off before the police arrive. I know I could have handled that better. I was blindsided by his instant shift from pleasant to filled with rage. Big thank you to the pharmacy team who kept me safe and the store manager for confronting the creep. They didn't have to do all of that. I'm thankful my husband recognized I was in an unsafe situation over the phone. This man is still out there somewhere in my area. Around the summer of 2017, I was in my sophomore year of high school. I was with my 2 friends, Johnny and Devin, on a Friday night. I was Snapchatting my crush at the time, and she was telling me that she was having a sleepover at a mutual friend's house. My crush's friend was also hitting on Johnny, and they were telling us to come over for a little bit to hang out since there were no parents home. Of course, being the hormonal teens we were, my friends and I were set on making it to the house before it got too late. We convinced Johnny's mom to give us a ride over to the house, but she told us that she wasn't going to be able to pick us up since she had to go to bed early for work in the morning. This didn't matter to us at all since we were just focused on being able to hang out with girls at night. After we spent time with the girls, the main girl who lived at the house told us that we had to leave since it was getting late and she wanted to sleep. At this point, it was around 11 p.m. and we were broke high schoolers, so the idea of getting an Uber was out the window. The 3 of us just accepted the fact that we were going to have to walk back to Johnny's house. The distance was less than 4 miles, but it was going to take an hour to walk. There was nothing really eventful that happened during most of the walk. We ended up stopping at a 7-Eleven because Devin wanted to get some beef jerky. Johnny and I waited outside of the store and saw 2 sketchy-looking dudes outside staring at Devin while he was in the store. As Devin came out, beef jerky in hand, he turned and looked at the 2 guys, then looked towards us, smiling with his beef jerky raised up. Johnny suggested that we cross the street because the people were starting to walk towards us. We continued to walk across the street and looked every few seconds to see the 2 guys walking the same speed as us on the other side of the road. I think they knew we were looking at them a lot because one of them began to make a slow 2-tone whistling noise. About 3/4 of a mile from Johnny's house, we were whispering and trying to figure out a plan to make sure these people didn't follow us back to his house. We looked across the road and the people were gone. This relief was short-lived as they appeared in an alleyway across the road with that same 2-tone whistle. Then Johnny said a phrase that put me into a fight or flight position. They're walking across the street towards us. At this point, Devin and I also turned to see that the two guys were walking towards us. When they saw the three of us turn to look at them, they began sprinting at us. I'm honestly glad that the three of us had the same idea. Run. We all started running as fast as we possibly could, and I didn't want to stop until we got back to Johnny's house. I saw Devin drop his charger for his phone, and he stopped to grab it and quickly caught back up with us. I didn't even dare to look back at the two guys chasing us, but I heard them yelling at us and doing that same horrifying two-tone whistle. I was wearing these really beat-up low-top Vans that were destroying my feet with every cushion-less step I took. It didn't matter. All that mattered was running until I couldn't hear those people yelling and whistling. I'm not sure if the two guys were trying to just scare us and have a quick little laugh, but after 2 or 3 minutes they stopped chasing us. We still didn't stop running. I remember Devin saying they stopped chasing in between his gasps for air, and all I said was, "Keep running." We turned the corner, and Johnny's house was less than 200 feet from us. Johnny ran faster so we could get to the door first and unlock it. We threw ourselves inside, locked the door, and ran up the stairs to Johnny's room. We all spent the next few minutes catching our breath and checking out the window to see if we could spot the two sketchy guys walking around. I'm very glad to say that we didn't see them again, but Devin showed me a picture of a pistol that he searched up on his phone and said, "This is what it looked like." When I went to grab my charger, I saw one of them with a gun that looked like this. I'm not sure what is more bone-chilling, the fact that I was running away from two people with one of them having a gun, or the thought of turning around while running just to see a man with a firearm running after me. This is something I really want to talk about to be sure that everyone is cautious and stays level-headed at all times. For context, this happened when I lived in the middle of nowhere in Canada. It was an old town that had quite a few abandoned buildings due to absence of residents. Me and many friends were tired of the lack of entertainment options for us, so what we did was explore these abandoned buildings. Prior to the experience I am about to talk about, we never had anything too crazy happen to us. Occasionally, we'd see a small bit of blood like liquid, and we did see a pentagram on the ground from someone who went to a house previously, but nothing too bad. Until the last time I had gone exploring abandoned buildings. Now, when I was younger, I used to go to a daycare that was part mental hospital. Weird combination, I know. It closed down due to a lack of patients and lack of children at the daycare. I decided to go back there with my friends a few years ago. For context, I was 15 when this happened. Most of my friends were the same age. When we did get there, it was rather cliché. There was fog, it was rather dark, and there was a light drizzle of rain. We went to the main gate, which was padlocked shut. We decided to help each other hop over it and made a ton of noise. We were laughing and giggling the whole time, unsuspecting of what was to come. We looked around the small play place/park with flashlights we had on our person. Even with our somewhat powerful flashlights, our visibility was rather limited. We decided to enter the decaying building. Glass and dirt crunched under our feet as we stepped into the daycare section of the complex. There were still old Legos, wood chips from previous furniture, old torn dolls and toys strewn about. The further we walked around the daycare section, we naturally became more and more silent until all we could hear was the crunch of the dirt under our feet. I found some crayons in a plastic container in the corner of the room. I walked over to pick them up, when all of a sudden we heard a loud crash coming from behind a metal door leading to the psych ward part of the building. My friends and I all looked at each other. As a whole, we were a group of 5. Most of them were very bold and cocky. We all looked at each other when my friend Brian suggested we go and look to see where the sound came from. Personally, I was not too fond of the idea, but with my group of friends, there was no way anyone was going to decline such a thing. We all stacked up on the door and opened it. It was rusted to the floor and we heaved to get it open. As we walked in, the metallic smells and must became stronger, with a hint of something else which I couldn't put my finger on at that moment. We walked in, our flashlights pointed in every direction with Brian leading the group. The hallways were tight, and to the left and right were the occasional metal doorway, some with doors open. I felt slightly claustrophobic, and it felt a little hard to breathe. As we continued, Brian shone his flashlight into a room and recoiled. We all stopped walking as Brian slowly entered the room. "What is it?" I asked him. "I thought I saw someone here. It seems all fine now." To be honest, I thought he was just messing with us to increase our anxiety. But looking back, I think he was completely honest. He backed out of the room, and we continued walking deeper into the psych ward, when another friend swiftly told us to stop. We came to a halt, and all listened. In the distance ahead of us, we heard the subtle pitter-patter of footsteps echo through the hallway. We all looked at each other, fear in each of our eyes. Brian continued walking toward the sounds. We considered turning back for a second without Brian, wondering if some ghost or something was in the building. But we couldn't do that to him. The closer we got, the more I felt like I was being watched. When finally we entered a room on the right, which had the smell of rotting meat. In front of us was a dead deer. Its innards were spilled all over the floor, staining the concrete. A friend of mine had a very weak stomach and vomited all over the floor. That's when we heard whispering from somewhere. Brian shone his flashlight to the corner of the room where a man with short hair was standing with his head down. He wore a bright green t-shirt stained with what I assume was blood and torn beige pants. He did not have any socks, and his feet seemed damaged. He was twitching sporadically and continued to mumble even after we saw him. We stared at him for a solid 30 seconds before he made his first true movement. He looked up at us with a haunting grin that sent shivers down our spine. "You guys here for the feast?" He said each word with varying inflection and energy. This kicked us over the edge, and we bolted out of that room all the way back to the daycare center. The door was still open, and we decided to try and slam it shut, but the rust and pure weight of the door almost kept it open. It took 3 of us pulling with all of our strength to close it, and just before we did, I could still see the silhouette of the man watching us, his white teeth being the only other human feature I could see. As we sat behind the metal door, catching our breath for a second, all looking at each for confirmation that we all saw the same thing. After a little bit of labored breathing from each of us, we heard a light tapping on the door. That's when we decided that it was time to leave. We booked it out of the vicinity completely and ran home. A year after we visited that spot, police went back to do a routine search of the area and found the man. It was stated that this guy used to go to the psych ward before it closed down. He escaped the facility he was transferred to and lived off of the wildlife around the complex. When the cops brought him in, he had a series of diseases and sickness from eating raw meat. His mental condition was much worse than before. There were future rumors that he did kill someone in the forest while searching for food, but nothing has been confirmed. In the end, guys, be careful, especially in dangerous areas such as abandoned buildings. This is something that happened a while ago while I was babysitting. For a little bit of context, I'm a 21-year-old college student and have been babysitting since I was 14. I'm not an expert on literally anything, however. Over the years, I have learned caution and resilience. At 15, I took babysitting classes at our youth center, as well as a female self-defense course. I babysit at least once a month for this one family. I like them because they pay me more than my usual hourly rate. They have a big house with internet that I can use to do homework, and the 2 kids are surprisingly well-behaved and compliant. So the 2 parents have like a monthly ritual of going out around 5 p.m. and returning a little after 2 a.m. I'm always offered to sleep in the guest bedroom and stay until morning. I usually just stay awake and abuse their satellite TV, and then leave when they come back. The house is in a nice neighborhood without a whole lot of neighbors. Very quiet. Also, their house is armed with an alarm system that I have the code to and can arm and disarm it through my phone. That'll be relevant in a little while. So I always take them for pizza at this place that has like an arcade. I do this so that they tire themselves out and go to bed early. Plus, the girl that I babysit is also on a mission to win a family of stuffed animals from the prize store, so I'd be the world's worst babysitter if I didn't guide her in that pursuit. If anyone's maybe wondering for whatever reason, after Friday night, she only needs the daddy stuffed animal before her collection is complete. Go girl! Anywho, I'm rambling. I was sitting at a table and watching them play in a ball pit, while also texting on my phone. This couple came over and sat at the same table as me. It was a long table with parents scattered here and there, so this wasn't alarming. The couple looked normal enough. Both were probably in their mid-20s, possibly a little older. They talked to each other, but then the guy asked me, "Are you the one babysitting Dr. So-and-so's kids?" So the parents of these children are both doctors, and the specific region that we live in, this would be common enough information, but I still chose to answer their question with an irrelevant statement. I wonder what they use to make the pizza here. Yeah, I know. I'm a master of deception. I deserve an Oscar for my performance. However, they seem to see right through my clever ruse. They started making weird comments. They talked about the kid's parents, they commented on the daughter, and how they wondered if she would look as pretty as their mom. Okay, my dudes. I don't know if that was intended to be creepy, but I'm just going to be safe and pretend that it was. Then the woman says to me, and I quote, "Do they really let you dress like that while watching their kids?" She motioned with her eyes towards my t-shirt, which was admittedly a little tight, though aside from a little bit of a bosom crack, not revealing. I have a thin frame and a large chest. It's 90 degrees in my region of the US right now, so it's not like I can wear a hoodie, and my tits have a Crips and Bloods type relationship with any kind of shirt that has buttons. I saw that as my cue to go and get the kiddos and bring them to get their prizes so that we could bounce. After some very thought-provoking philosophical debating, they both got their prizes and we headed back over to the house. So fast forward a few hours. Both kids were bathed and put to sleep. I delivered a heartwarming rendition of Goodnight Moon and read a very spooky chapter of The Werewolf of Fever Swamp and tucked them into dreamland. It was around 9 p.m. I was caught up on homework and was just watching TV when I heard some movement on the porch. I didn't think much of it at first, but the doorknob started rattling violently. I initially started moving towards the front door to see who it was, but miraculously, I remembered that it was late at night. I was home alone with 2 kids, and I very much wanted to live. I turned around to grab my purse, which is where I keep my taser. As I'm moving, the back door starts rattling as well, and was accompanied by some banging noises. That's when I remembered that I hadn't enabled the alarm system after returning. Now, if this was a horror movie scenario, of course the alarm wouldn't have worked, and the intruders would have made their way inside. I hate to disappoint if you were expecting something more exciting, but I enabled it again quite easily with no incident. I ran upstairs and grabbed the 2 kids. I put them in their parents' room in the walk-in closet. I still hate that I scared them. When I gathered them up, I gave no context as to what was going on. I didn't want to tell them that someone was trying to break into the house, but in the process the fear of not knowing seemed to be worse. I instructed them to stay in there and stay quiet, and only to open the door if they hear me talking to them. I then locked the bedroom door, which is the only door on the upstairs floor that locks. I sat there with my taser out and hit the panic button on the phone app. Several minutes went by, then I got the notification through the app that the alarm system was disabled. I planned on calling 911, even though the panic button already took care of that. But I found it more beneficial to arm it back. Then it disarmed again, so I armed it again. Then it disarmed once again, so I armed it once again. By this time I could hear what sounded like 2 sets of footsteps walking up the stairs. Good job, girl. You locked yourself inside with 2 potential assailants. I was holding it together for the sake of the kids, but not too deep inside. I was scared to death. When I heard the footsteps get near the door and saw the knob twisting, I took a deep breath and pulled the trigger on my taser, just to let them know that I was armed, though it realistically wouldn't do much good. I informed them through the door that the alarm was triggered and police were on their way. Thankfully, I was greeted by a familiar voice. My name? It's Doctor. His name. You're safe. I opened the door and ran into their arms and started sobbing. I hadn't realized truly until it was over just how scared I really was. The kids came out, without me giving them the okay, but their parents were there, so I'll let it slide. When I enabled the alarm on my phone, they both got the notification from the place they were at. With the app, you have the option to view the porch cameras as well. When they got the notification that the panic button was activated, they saw through the camera that there were people on each side of the house, one man, one woman. When the alarm kept disarming, that was them trying to get into the house. Police report was filed by them, and I gave a statement mentioning the two weirdos I met earlier that day, even though there was really no evidence that would directly point to them. Camera footage didn't give any positive face IDs either. So, yeah, I was scared. I'm getting over it now. I'm just grateful that the couple that I was babysitting for were close enough to make it to me. I hate to say it, but I find the police response time to be terrible. I'm currently back in my own apartment that's an hour away. I checked in once to see how the kids were doing, and they're holding up fine. I'm just glad they had proper protection in their home and that this didn't end up to be any worse. I would be extremely thankful if you considered subscribing and sharing this video if you liked it.